Hey Marie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Perfect.
totally.
Okay, good.
I was telling our friends that you join us from Switzerland. It's almost neither.
Exactly, yes.
And yeah, the topic for this broadcasting is the G20 and sustainability. How important it is from all the governments to understand how these challenges that we're gonna face, that we're facing now, the others that we will face in a near future, how the relevance of having this conversation and these plans to uh, tackle the problems, it's the key and it's really important because as a worldwide problem, COVID has changed the way we are facing and building this world. I think it's really hard, and it's a problem that we all should be worried about. It's not only, as we were telling before, it's not only a sanitary problem, it's climate change, which is present in this. So yeah, what do you think from the Euro perspective?
Yeah, thank you so much also for inviting me, and I hope the internet will be stable because a lot of people actually use internet now because we cannot go out and leave, so everyone is using the internet, especially in the evening time. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's like crashing. Anyway, so I think you're really pointing out a very interesting question, like the connection of like the response to coronavirus and the response to climate change, biodiversity crisis, and all the other sustainability issues. So here in Switzerland, we have seen a very, very like fast, rapid, and bold, unprecedented response by the government to the corona crisis. But when it comes to the climate crisis or like the
It's
biodiversity
totally
crisis,
different.
it's very different. It's very slow, very reluctant. People are not stepping up, and even if they do, it's something like you talk about like one minor issue, but you're never like now here like everyone goes all in. So like we have like millions of dollars to like support the economy, but also for education for everyone. And when it comes to climate, it's like, oh, we have a little bit something here to do something. And I guess like really this unprecedented and bold action. So the government can do it, but they choose to not do it for the climate and for biodiversity until now.
Yeah, it's like they were thinking we have more time to solve this climate crisis. It's like if we were thinking, oh no, I won't attend corona crisis, just give me one more month or give me more time, and then I join with my crew and then I start talking. It's not work like that. Like crisis goes and grew immediately worldwide, and this is something that we're facing when talking to corona. I was watching, as I think others, like the other people that's watching us, these G20 reunions, the live broadcasting, and I was really worried because they were talking in like in this political speech. They're saying, oh, we need to take action, but they don't talk about the specific actions. So that's actually worry because this or the younger generation, we have a different mentality about the future and how are we going to live and how are we going to face these problems that are coming to ourselves
Mm.
like immediately.
Absolutely. I think what we saw now with the response to coronavirus also by the G20 was that they really could get together like across borders, across different mentalities, and really tackle this specific issue. And this is not far from what we as young people and young leaders want. We want that our governments are taking unprecedented, fast, and bold actions to prevent the catastrophic effects of the climate crisis. So the governments just proved in the last couple of weeks that they actually can do it and they actually can come together and solve a crisis like we have at the moment. So the only thing with they are lacking, like they are lacking the willingness to implement, because we have all the solutions to combat the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis. We have all the solutions, we have all the knowledge we need, but
Yeah.
it's lacking will that we actually implement it at the end. And that's what we need to trigger, that the G20 as the political leaders but also the economic leaders are coming together and really steering this conversation, because we cannot longer only point on like the smaller countries and say like, oh, they also have to do something, because at the end, like the ones who polluted historically the most and still contributing the most to the climate and biodiversity crisis and overall the sustainability crisis, as we have also with inequality, they have to step ahead and they have to go on. They have to steer this conversation and these actions. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to point that this is not about a first world country or a third world country, because we've seen like those small Latin American countries like Honduras and Guatemala taking fast and immediately actions when talking about Corona, but and they're economic growing, they're a third world country, but actually the America, the USA, it was only prolonging and asking for more time to take action. Those are the countries that are actually going out from the Paris Climate Agreement, and they're the first economy. So I say this is not about being and have the structure. This is about will, as you said. We need to take action, but not only the governments, as we were telling us. The key to stop coronavirus, it's the people. The people should stay at home, but they have to understand how this works in a collaborative work with the government and the other society, so we can tackle this problem.
Yes, absolutely. And what I think is really major now in this crisis, that the way we protested, we striked, we showed our anger is no longer possible. So we young people cannot go to the streets anymore. We cannot go in front of our parliament and demand rapid action, because everyone is forced to stay at home, which is good because we have to flatten the curve and we have to take care that our healthcare system and our life supporting system can't keep going, that we don't have like more people who are dying. So it's very important that we as young people take our responsibility, listen to the scientists, listen to the government, and try to stay home and reduce unnecessary spread of the virus. But while doing this, we lose our very unique pressure we could actually put on the government, which was working very well during the last year, because a lot of young people that cannot vote, they can't really influence the politics. But what we can do is like civil disobedience. We can go and strike and demonstrate and having large gatherings. But exactly this form of protest is no longer working. And this is a big problem, because with this, like the focus shifting away now from like the climate, from sustainability, to only the health crisis. So of course we have to solve this, but we can't solve one crisis while not focusing on the others.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a full spectrum of what's happening worldwide, because we've seen that what happened and starts in China can have a problem and become a global issue. So when we talk about security, when we talk about health problems, when we talk about environmental problems, this is worldwide. Whatever it happens to the Amazonia, it also happens to another part of the world. So that's the importance of the G20 group. Like all the politicians should be warm, should be, they need to be and have a fully understand of how this works and what's happening worldwide. So yeah, I point again, like the response we have as citizens from our politicians, they keep the same political speech. And that's not what we want, that's not what we deserve, and that's not what's going to solve the problem. So this is really, really important, as you were telling. We need all join, not only the people, the governments, but all the countries together and have a global solution. And I'll talk about this, like say global citizenship, global cities, and global communities. We need to build these communities to fully understand and fully face these problems.
Absolutely. I think the very important aspect here is also the intergenerational equity and intergenerational approach, that we throughout all generations work together. So in this case, we as young people and as young generation, we take up the leadership and like stay at home, even if we are not that affected as the older generation. While since we we believe that intergenerational equity is very important, is that the older generation who are at the moment in power and taking decision for our future, that they are stepping up and then combat the climate crisis and combat biodiversity crisis. So while we are doing now a favor for them, they should support, or they have to support our demands and drastically reduce the emissions. But also that what you pointed out, that the world actually in the last few weeks, they proved that they can work together, that we can like all over the world come together and very like rapidly solve a large scale, unprecedented crisis. And I think this is really important because it can give back hope to the people that, yes, it's possible, because many people said, yeah, actually, it's nice what you're demanding, but this is not possible because we cannot work together. And we just proved in the last few days that we actually can, especially the G20, who have been very split and their opinion actually went in opposite direction. They could come together and they actually could achieve certain agreements. And I think this is really important also to give back the hope to the politicians, but also to the civil society and to the people that yes, we can do it if there is enough if there is enough pressure. And I think as soon as the crisis is over, it's up on us again to put up this pressure on the politicians to go on with like the negotiations and go on with really taking unprecedented action, because as you mentioned before, we long crossed like the line of only making nice speeches. What we need is like real action, implementation of our strategies, because if we can't implement it, then we want, like, a speech itself won't reduce CO2 emissions, won't bring back species. So we need the action on the ground. Yes.
Yeah, totally. As you were pointing clearly, the world needs a huge effort to change, and that effort comes from the people. No matter if you're part of your rich, like we've seen that these problems affect everybody. So that's something I really want to point. And yeah, as you were telling, we need will, and we need to recognize the problem and talk about it. It's not an easy cake, it's not an easy piece, but as you said, we can solve it. If now we're talking about a health problem, where are we gonna be talking about next? So what's coming tomorrow? And that's something that should be worrying us. I've been reading this climate change book, which is a research from 1995. And I was amazed that they were predicting this climate change and this huge revolution that in what implies to everybody. And I'm amazed that how is this knowledge not fully spread in our communities, in all the citizens, and how we transmit the right message to the right people.
Yeah, the scientific knowledge has been here for over 100 years. So we scientifically know that we have to do something, and also we know what to do. We have to reduce the amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But there is a very big lobby of industries and economic leaders who want to preserve the status quo, or even want to burn more fossil fuels, because for them it's a lot of money. So if they, for example, possess like a field with gas or oil, they obviously want to drill it and dig it. And that's the biggest problem, that the political elite is very connected to this, to the elite who is actually in possession of a lot of like oil fields, and hence obviously the politics is also like financially supported by them, and this makes it very, very tricky to then go in an opposite direction, right? Because the politicians are voting in favor of the economic leaders who are again obviously in favor of burning coal and burning oil, and are not in favor of a just and unprecedented transition. We actually need. Even like the last scientific report by the IPCC, this is the International Panel on Researchers for Climate Change, they came out with a report about the difference from 1.5 and 2 degrees, and they came to the conclusion that it needs an unprecedented and rapid change across all different economic areas. So we cannot only like change, for example, in production, but we also have to change in agriculture. We have to change when it comes to mobility. So it's like a cross sectorial change. And in all of these sectors, there are a lot of very influential people and economies, and they obviously are benefiting from the status quo, and they don't want to transition because this implies a loss of money, implies a loss of power, and they are very, they really want to like track this on, and that's a big problem. Yes.
Yeah, that's actually a political, economical problem. When we talk about sustainability, the concept is growing each time. When we talk about health problem, we don't talk only about health systems. We talk about money, we talk about investment, we talk about companies, we talk about politicians, democracy, and how is this going to work? So I think this is a problem that we're facing now as a generation, but the problems that we are leading to the next and future generations are going to be even bigger if we don't try to solve this, if we don't take a clear action on this. So it's going to be really important, because as Greta, and I repeat again, it's raising about the climate change. It's only part of it. Like, this is a global problem, and it lays on everyone. So yeah.
And I think what is very difficult for a lot of people is to understand the interlinkages between the different crises, the interlinkages between biodiversity and climate and water and food, but also then it comes back to health. And I think what is like really really empowering to see that, like, recently there have been some articles published by big media houses about interconnection, for example, of climate change and the health crisis. So how
supply change.
Exactly. How is is climate change or like biodiversity and the environmental destruction fueling crises like this? How is air pollution fueling the spread of coronavirus? And I think this is really important to understand, that we can't solve one crisis while neglecting the other crises. So while we try to solve the coronavirus crisis, we have to take care and see what other crises have an implication, and maybe if we find the right tools, we can be very effective, because if we change something in the system, it has an effect on the others. So it's really important to understand the interlinkages between the different crises and then act accordingly.
Yeah, because at the end of it all, we're talking about the same crisis. I think a climate change crisis includes coronavirus, because it's a clear problem that this affects the lungs, this affects the human health, and this is only get worse with pollution, as you were talking. It only get worse with this economic and developing, bad and wrong developing of energy, as we were telling, and this goes along with bad policies and corrupt governments.
Yeah, but what I think is, like, again, really amazing to see that politicians all over the world came so rapidly together and found solutions to combat the corona crisis. So we can learn now during this crisis how also like democracies came together as quickly to really have response on different levels. So they had an answer to the economy, they had an answer for the education sector, they had an answer for the health sector, obviously, for the like for so many different like various levels, they had an answer, and they could come up so quickly with solutions. And I think this is amazing to see, because this again proves that yes, we are able to solve these crises, and we have everything what we need. We even have the political will to do it. For a crisis, it was just not the climate crisis, but we are getting there. And I think, like, for me, the whole crisis situation we have, obviously there is a lot of very bad things, but again, it gives me also hope that we can actually like face and combat global challenges, that also that we learn from this crisis, because some countries obviously were waiting too long until it took off already so quickly, and if there is an exponential curve of cases, you can't stop it. So that we saw how dangerous exponential threats are, that we can learn now and then combat faster climate and biodiversity crises, because we know that, like, the earlier we act, the cheaper it will be and the easier it will be also to combat the crises, so that we're not waiting until we're actually like heading to the peak for the climate and the biodiversity crisis, but we start already way earlier to find adequate solutions.
Yeah, I think as you were telling, this is a unique precedent, a worldwide precedent that we shouldn't leave, that we should keep in mind, and we must keep in mind this quick and right perspective that all the politicians took was great. As you were telling, some countries didn't fell in Corona, some others that were denying the problem and thought it was a different thing. As climate change, we think it is. So we must take immediate actions to solve all these crises, as you were telling, and treat it like a real crisis. That's the key to understand and fully achieve the goals of sustainability.
Yeah, and I think in this crisis maybe was not that important, and we didn't really include the voice of young people, but I think to combat the other crises, it's very important to include young people's in decision making, to include young people when it comes to implement the actions, implement the ideas of young people, because at the end it's our future. It's like this will happen in our lifetime. Therefore, I think it's very important to really listen to the young people and take their ideas into consideration. And yeah, this also needs a change in structure, especially in political structure, but also economic structures. And I think this is something we as young people have to really push for, that we want to be included in all levels of decision making, and that also we educate ourselves on what do we want and how do we best bring it across, and how we can support the implementation of the actions on the ground and really steer this forward. Because at the end, we don't have to wait until the older generation is taking up. We can already go ahead and like implement good examples, and then the people in power, they can actually come and see like, oh, actually it's a good idea, let's spread it and support then the movements. And I think this is really important. So not worry, just go ahead with the good solutions, and yeah, because we have no time to wait.
Yeah, there's only one solution for all the problem and to achieve sustainability agenda and sustainability world, and that's collaboration and that's partnerships. So it is the key for this. I really appreciate your participation. We're almost running out of time. So if you want to add something else for all the people that's actually watching us, this will be later shared on Facebook. So first of all, I really want to appreciate your participation, your feedback. We definitely want to keep talking about this. I hope this transmission does not keep alone and we make more of this. So I'll give you the word if you want to say something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to thank you also, because you mentioned like collaboration and partnership is the most important. I also think intercultural exchanges. So I think it's really important that young people across the world are coming together and discussing these issues, also like the reaction and the action we are going to take, but also that we try to take something hopeful out of this crisis. Of course, it's like very devastating what we see all over the world, but that we stay at home, we try to really flatten the curve, but also think about how can we flatten the curve for the climate crisis, how can we flatten the curve for the biodiversity crisis, how can we support sustainability actions in the future. So while some of us have more time because we maybe don't have like to travel and commute every morning in the traffic jam, maybe we can take this time and really think like what is like the meaning of our life, and like how do we want us and the next generations, what role should these people live in, and what is important. I think this perfect timing that we can think about this, and after or while we are facing out of this crisis, we can really focus on changing the world and how things are working, but we have to work all together and leave really no one behind. Thank you.
Never better safe. Thank you so much, Marie, for your feedback and for your participation.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you.
Bye.